listeners. It's another episode of Access to Inspiration podcast. I'm Sue Stockdale, and here is the podcast where you can learn from people who are unlike you. Today I'm down at Dora's Dairy in Wiltshire, speaking to a dairy farmer, Jonathan Cook. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Hello, glad to be here.
So tell me, what's it like being a dairy farmer?
I think it's unlike any other, well, I'm sure there are similar jobs, but very unlike other jobs. It's all-encompassing. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle. It's my home. It's what I think about pretty much every waking hour. Everything I do revolves around the farm.
And what's the history of the farm then? I know are you third generation?
I'm actually fourth generation. We bought this farm in 1953, coming from another farm in the village. We came here with 16 cows, I believe, and 4 men would have milked those every day. 2 of those men would have gone off to work in the railways and then come back in the evening and milk the same cows again. I think it was 30 acres when my grandfather bought it. We're now about 100. Luckily, land came up next door that we could buy as we got bigger. My dad got married, I think, in 1966 or 67, and then he started a family, and then that's when he started to expand the herd. So we're up to about 55 milking cows now, and totaling about 85 cows, depending on beef animals and young stock coming through.
I can imagine that being brought up as a youngster on a farm must have been heaps of fun. Tell us about that.
I was never bored. I didn't even know what the word bored meant. I had 2 older sisters, and we had quite a few neighbours that were of equal or similar ages. And we built dens and would go out with air rifles, and we were never bored. Driving tractors, haymaking seemed to last forever, all the summer. The summer was never long enough, but it always seemed to go on forever. And I don't know, yeah, they were good, certainly good times.
And was it always your expectation, or perhaps your family's expectation, that you would then take over the farm? Or did you have aspirations to go and do something else in your career?
My father never wanted me to. He was a frustrated politician, and he would have made a very good one. Very intelligent man that was pretty much stifled. He did parish council work, and he was a school governor for quite a few years. So he had other interests to satisfy that desire. I left the farm at 17, exploring my hormones, I suppose you could put it. But I've always gravitated back, I think, is something that's in the blood. My father wanted me to have a corporate job. He didn't want me to have to work every weekend, 14, 16, 18-hour days, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to calve a cow. He didn't want that for me. He wanted me to have an easy life. I know it sounds stupid now, and I actually chose it. For 2 years, I worked in an agricultural merchant in the office. It was fun. It was a good learning process. I learned quite a lot about dealing with people, and I didn't like being inside. That was probably my biggest realisation, but I probably already knew that already. It's not that I certainly wasn't capable of doing it or enjoyed it somewhat whilst I was there, but I'm afraid if it's outsiders in your blood, then I think it's the land actually that draws me. I think when you've grown up knowing a place, I'm tied to it. Emotionally, I'm tied to it. It's very hard to imagine being somewhere else. It's like when people say they need to go on holiday. I actually don't need to go on holiday. I'm actually totally happy here. I like to go and meet other people in different places and see how they're doing things, but to actually have a holiday, that's not in my way of thinking.
So I can tell by the energy in your voice that you're loving what you do. What is it that you love about your job?
Variety, I suppose, is one of the interesting parts of it. You really don't do the same thing twice. You might do it over the course of a year. Haymaking obviously lasts for a few weeks, but then you need to plan for that. You need to get the barns ready. You need to get the machinery ready. It's all a process, and I've got, every part of the year has a different process, what we need to go through. Nature is just fascinating because it always presents different problems for you. And conversely, the miracles that you see as well is always a challenge. There's never a dull moment. If we have a dry period, what do I feed the cows? The grass stops growing. If it's too wet, they ruin the fields. We're always subservient to the weather. There's no get away from the fact that the weather dictates what we do and how we do it. We are selling raw milk as well. I actually get my kick coming from people telling me that my food makes them better. Money doesn't touch that. When somebody comes in and says, you can't stop what you're doing because my digestion is rubbish without you, or my skin breaks open, or they just can't digest food, or they've got really severe IBS, they value what I do. They understand because they want to be involved in it because obviously it's so important to them. They want to be involved, and I enjoy sharing what I do. So if people come and say they want to see the cows, I'll take them to meet the cows, and we'll spend half an hour stroking cows. Well, let's face it, What comes better than that, you know? And they're so rewarding. They're bloody irritating and frustrating at times as well, like any animal or any person. But majority of the time, they're soothing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And as we're sitting here speaking, we can hear the lovely sounds of some puppies squeaking in the background, which is fantastic. And one sitting right close to us as well here. Tell us a bit more about how you farm and why you farm in the way that you do.
Historically, we've always been a dairy farm here. My dad used to have some pigs when he was younger as well as we do now. We've always been high on welfare, so we've always looked after the cows very well. We've never, ever pushed them to their limits. We've always been very mindful that the cow needs to be the cow. So I've just taken what my father and grandfather and great-grandmother did. Well, actually, I'm going back to what my great-grandmother, how she would have farmed. So now we keep the calves with the cows, which is pretty much commercial suicide on a commercial contract. So, my milk used to go off to Cadbury's.
That's the chocolate bar.
Chocolate bar people, yeah. So if you had dairy milk chocolate, there's a chance there could have been some of my milk in it. I was very proud of that fact because we produced top quality milk and we got paid a premium for it. But what we get paid is not enough. Well, it actually didn't cover half the cost of us producing it. And that's unsustainable. So we've changed from being a very commercial farmer where our cows would calve maybe once every year, 14 months, and we would sell the calves off and we would just milk the cows. We weren't pushing them, but that's all we did. So now we're letting the cows grow the calves. We can't keep them all, unfortunately. I hope one day we can. We have some more land, we'd be able to do that. But majority, all the cows stay here for at least 6 weeks with their mothers. Part of the reason we do that, because it's damn sight easier than doing it any other way, because the mothers look after them really well. They grow so well, they get exercise, they learn how to be part of a herd.
That's important.
It is important, and they learn how to graze. So the calves that go off to market, we nearly always top the market because they're strong calves, and the people that are buying those calves to rear on know that they're not going to have any problems with them. Their health is top, so that's why I get top money for them. But also the calves then we keep, they grow very well. They're social animals, they learn how to graze. It's letting a cow be a cow, basically. It's just, so what we do something called milk sharing. So the calves are separated at night for, it was actually less than 12 hours because by the time we get around to it, it's usually quite late. But the calves are separated at night, so they have time on their own in their own little social groups. And then we get 12 hours of milk because if you forget to get them in, there's no milk left in the cow in the morning. Absolutely none. So our whole farming in that regard has changed. So we're trying to go down the regenerative path. I mean, it takes quite a few processes to get to the stage where we can actually do what we call mob grazing. So what we're trying to do is replicate the ancient way the buffalo would have grazed these lands. So they would have been kept quite close with predators. So they would be in a very tight pack. They would intensively graze a small area for a very short amount of time. So the way we will replicate that is with electric fencing. So we keep them corralled in a small area. But we want the cows to eat the top third of the plant, which is the most nutritious, and trample the rest. So by trampling, you get a covering. So the covering keeps the moisture in. You're breaking the stems of the plants, so you're feeding the microbiological life. So you're always feeding the soil. But by not eating it all, grazing it down intensively, you've left a load of solar panels. So that plant will recover so much quicker because you've got the energy that's already left in the stem that's left, but also you've got the solar panels to rejuvenate that plant. So in this peak of the season, every 21 days, the cows will go over that piece of land. That's how we anticipate it doing. I mean, there are some dairy farmers that are moving their cows 5 or 6 times a day.
But you're not.
Not with us do, but maybe half a day. This year we're doing a day. Next year it'll be probably half a day. So as we swap the cows over, as we get them in for milking, after milking they go into a different side of the farm. And then at night when we separate the calves, we'll then pass them over to another side. So they'll constantly be swapping sides of the farm. And that way we don't need to use artificial fertilizers. So immediately is a benefit to the wildlife. And the yield that you get from the grass is just so much better because you're treating the grass. I suppose it's evolved to be treated. That's how everything worked in harmony. So we're trying to do that, and it's quite a process.
You said it's a 24-hour-a-day life for you, and really I can see the close connection to nature and to the land that you're farming. But does it make money?
And that's a good question. We were certainly profitable a few years ago when I was doing it very commercially. Not running the cows to their limit, but we were getting a good yield from the cows. We weren't rearing any calves. Literally all we did was milk cows. We had calves, sold them, milked cows. So yeah, we were profitable then. When we made the stupid idea of actually keeping cows with cows and milking them once a day, which is something which, I always milked them twice a day before, we milk them once a day. The benefits, slightly lifestyle. My biggest one is the health of the cows. Milking once a day has virtually eliminated any lameness problems. Fertility is better because they're not athletes anymore. They're Western donkeys now. Effectively, they are Western donkeys. The milk's better quality. They're happier, healthier. And so I find it very easy to sell my milk because they're from happy, healthy cows. It's happy, healthy milk. And it's the nutritional value of my milk. We don't feed soya anymore. We cut soya out of their diet. We still feed a little bit of cereals, which we're trying to get away from. But the alternatives, again, are very expensive. And I've only just given up my contract with Cadbury's, so I was still on a commercial price up until a few weeks ago. So now I need to sell all of my milk at a sustainable price, which is actually 5 times what I was getting from Cadbury's. So I only need to sell basically a quarter of the milk to get to where I was with Cadbury's. I'm not saying that Cadbury's were giving us a bad price in the industry. They were a very good price and they're a very good company to work with.
So how do you find your customers now then? If you've chosen to finish the contract with Cadbury's, how and who and where do you sell your milk to?
So social media is very good. That's a very good way of talking about word of mouth. It's almost like an organic growth. We've been selling raw milk for 3 years now. And there is a knock-on for people that the health benefits, when people get over the fact that it's raw and they got past the fact that it's not going to kill them.
So tell us what raw is for those listeners that haven't heard of it before. What is raw milk compared to what you might buy in a supermarket?
Raw milk is milk. Every other milk that you get is a changed version of. So raw milk is straight from the cow. I mean, it literally is. I put it through 2 filters and it's cooled and then you can drink it. So it has all the enzymes that you need to digest it, all of the vitamins. Well, if you think what milk is designed to do, it's designed to feed a mammal. Everything is in, if the cows are fed grass and they're not stressed, everything is in perfect balance. Proteins, carbohydrates, the enzyme you need to digest it, the proteins. It's a perfect food. And we have customers, not many, that pretty much just drink milk because it's a complete food. It's one of the only complete foods there are. Their health is always very good. And people usually come to us through health. They've got to the stage where they've given up with the medicines. They've tried every single cream for their eczema. They're on 2 inhalers for their asthma. The eczema, I mean, having somebody come and their face was actually cracking open when they spoke. When they were speaking, it was just horrendous. Well, within a month, that's healed.
That's the satisfaction you're getting from the product that you're producing, is seeing the impact that it has on other people's lives, really.
Massive impact. Raw milk's had a really bad rap. Mainly dairy industry and pharmaceutical companies pharmaceutical companies don't want people to be healthy, do they? I think that they did a survey and they found that I think if you drank raw milk, you get 1/3 less colds a year. It doesn't sound a lot, but if you buy 2 packets of cold and flu syrup, and there's, 60 odd million in the country, well, the mathematics is quite impressive. So they don't want us to do it. All of the kids growing up, when the dentists take x-ray of my sister and our jaws, they can't believe the density, the bone density and the density of the teeth. I'm like, wow, we just don't see that.
It's the calcium, is it?
The calcium, yeah, because it's completely available. In pasteurised milk, it's not. It analyses there. Yes, it's all there, because you haven't got the enzymes and all the proteins are denatured. You can't actually absorb it. And it's a travesty what they do to milk, to be honest with you. I used to break my heart sending it go off on a tanker and knowing I'd spend that much time making sure it was clean, healthy, at the best milk I could for them to go and destroy it. That was not logical.
I can imagine how difficult that was for you. And now that you've got control of the whole process really from start to finish and seeing your customers, it must give you a great deal of satisfaction. As our podcast is about inspiration, John, I'm wondering, where do you get your inspiration from, or what or who inspires you?
Thank you for the question, because it's a hard one to necessarily actually pinpoint when you're just living the dream every single day. I think the miracle of bringing life into the world, calving cows, I don't know, there's always something very special about bringing a life into the world, and the responsibility of that as well. What inspires me? Doing something different, seeing other people that are doing something different. So nature is probably one of my inspirations, I suppose. You're
reminding me, as you're talking about a recent podcast episode where we interviewed Paul Rose, who's our first Access to Inspiration ambassador. And he talked about people having lost the connection to nature, and perhaps part of the pandemic that we've all experienced around the world recently, that being locked down at home has perhaps enabled us to just reflect and see nature in a different way. What's your take on how society as a whole is disconnected with nature and what impact that has?
I think they're very disconnected, and we see that with our new customers that come that ask very sensible questions, but from a place of disconnect. The basics of life have been missed. Not just how milk comes in a bottle in the supermarket, but the actual mechanics of life and nature and how the seasons work and what a difference it makes to the animals and the people, and the fact that the milk will taste different in May than it does in August. And why would that be? It's just milk. Well, no, it's not just milk. So taking people around the cows, actually opening their eyes, especially the children, because the children are great. We have some school children come here. They're, I think, 3 or 4, 5 years old, 5 years old, I suppose. And the questions I ask, they see things, they do see things differently. And they ask some really intense questions, and you go, wow, I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm going to have to think about it or go and research it. I suppose in some way that's a bit of an inspiration as well. And that opens your eyes to other things, and that's good fun too.
So you're an educator, really, as well as a producer?
Yeah. I very much see myself as an educator. That's part of what we do, absolutely. And it's really important, I think it's vitally important that people understand how food becomes food, because people think that food comes from supermarkets. And it doesn't. It very much doesn't. There was always a farmer at the front end of it. My milk isn't cheap. It's not cheap for a reason, because it's good quality. The way I'm doing it is to make sure that the high welfare, we're not destroying land, we're actually building carbon, soil. And when I explain it to people, they go, oh yeah, we're on board. Okay, totally understand. Education is so important, because 100 years ago, everybody knew a farmer or somebody that worked on a farm, their uncles, their dads, their grandparents. So whereas a lot of this ridiculous food eating disorders have come about, they would have gardens. They grew their own food. They knew how hard it was to get vegetables from seed to plate. Rather than just walk into a supermarket, they understood the processes, so they valued it far greater. You know, it wasn't all done with the machines. A lot of these guys did it by hand. I think everybody should grow at least one crop. Even if it's in a window box, grow a crop of potatoes, just one.
And then you can learn about nature.
If you've got a garden, have 2 chickens. Best waste disposal system you will ever have, and you get eggs. And they'll be the best eggs you've ever had. What could be better? I feel like it's my responsibility to be an educator. Farmers, unfortunately, had an organisation called the Milk Marketing Board. And I say unfortunately because what it did, it actually removed the farmer from actually the selling process. So their milk was just picked up and they were given a price for it. So they didn't need to. You know, it's like a builder. If he builds a house and it falls down and you say, I want my house built, do you know any good builders? No, I'm sorry, I don't. It's the same with the food. Does the food taste good? If it tastes rubbish and makes you ill, you're not going to go back for any more, are you? And so the farmer lost his connection with the end user. So also, the farmer couldn't say to him, oh, we're having a rough time because there's no grass in the fields, or it's so wet, or, you know, that daily update that people got every single day, they don't get it anymore. And now we're 5 generations maybe away from having any direct contact with a farmer. It's a mystery for a lot of these people, and that's sad. And I think COVID, we certainly notice here that a lot of people, they've been walking. We've had a lot of new customers because they've just been walking. And lots have said, wow, we didn't know this was on our doorstep, because everywhere they went was in a car. People say, well, we just didn't know this is. That's like, it's a gold mine. Yeah, it is. And now you're enjoying it.
So there's been some upsides. I wanted to take you to have a step back and actually think about, what has a life in farming taught you about you or about society?
You can't control anything. Mother Nature's a very strong force. If it's going to be, it's going to be. That's one of the things I'm probably most respectful of. You have very little control over a lot of things, and you just have to roll with it. So rolling with it is probably one of my things that I've learned. And
if you were to pass on a bit of wisdom to our listeners from your perspective as a farmer, John, what would it be? A bit of life's wisdom for them.
Value what's important in life, health, and we are what we eat.
Well, I think that with your enthusiasm for farming and for health and for connection to nature, I think you've done a great job today in our conversation to extol the virtues of that, John.
Thank you, Sue.
One final question. If people want to find out more about Dora's Dairy and about you and the farm, how might they do that on social media? Where would they find you?
Social media, Dora's Dairy, raw milk and grass-fed beef, I believe it's on Facebook. But Dora's Dairy will get you there. And obviously through the website, dorasdairy.co.uk.
Fantastic. We'll put links to those on the show notes. And it's been a great pleasure to talk to you today, John. Thank you very much for your time.
Likewise. Thanks, Sue.
Wow. I'm super chilled after speaking to John Cook. I really enjoyed being in the outdoors and hearing him express his love for the work that he does in looking after the cows. And their milk tastes great too. Please head over to our website, accesstoinspiration.org, and let us know what was most impactful from this podcast for you. We'd love to connect with you also on Twitter or on Instagram, where we are Access to Inspiration. In the next episode, I will be speaking to Nontu Mugabe, another of our pioneers in this series. Nontu was the first African female to run 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days. An amazing feat. Wow, I'm just exhausted to even think about that challenge. So I'm sure we'll learn a lot from her. I hope you can join me then.